This podcast is a proud member of the Fan Hub 100. Football without fans is nothing, so we've partnered with Fan Hub to put fans first. Search Fan Hub app to play your part in the journey.
Welcome back to another Speak Sunderland Reaction podcast, and a happy new year to all Sunderland fans around the world. After a 2-week absence due to a COVID outbreak at the Academy of Light, Sunderland were back in action yesterday away to Northampton Town in a game that did end 0-0, starting the year off with a bang, as they say. Joining me today to talk about the game from a Sunderland perspective is Graham and John. You both doing well, fellas?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, very well.
Graham,
Thank you very much. Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for asking me on.
Both had a good Christmas, New Year?
Yeah, it was decent, mate. It was nice and chilled, and there wasn't any football to stress or to send you to sleep. So
Yeah, pretty much the same. I kind of was quite glad of the rest, which I don't know if it's a bad thing to say because you're meant to be hankering for those games, but I haven't felt like football's been a normal thing for a long, long time. I don't like watching the games on telly, so it was nice to have a rest from paying a tenner because I think that would have been about 30 quid over Christmas, which I could have done without. So Sunderland saved us money as well as anguish. So yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad.
I can't actually remember the last time we must have had a Boxing Day without a Sunderland game. Must have been some time ago.
A while ago, that. I mean, I can't remember a Boxing Day without a Sunderland game. Not in my lifetime. Which is a fair while. I can't remember one without one. No, not at all. But it's quite nice, isn't it? Better than last year. Bolton 0-0 at home.
It's a nice change. Certainly is. But also joining us to get a Northampton perspective is Charles from It's All Cobblers to Me. How are you getting on, mate? You well?
Hi, mate. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks very much.
Very good. Very good. Well, yesterday's game means Sunderland are now 12 points from top with only 2 games in hand on Lincoln, who I believe got another win yesterday against Wimbledon. And obviously the 2-week break that we've had, it couldn't have been avoided given the number of players with COVID. But before the outbreak, we'd beaten Lincoln 4-0 away from home in what was probably our best performance of the season. And obviously in this league especially, momentum is key. But John, for you, could that break have come at the worst time for Sunderland?
I think it was really bad. If we'd have had the Wimbledon game cancelled, I don't think we'd have been in too bad a position. But it just killed the momentum because obviously we had to change. I think it was 8 players we had to change, and we've got a fairly strong squad. But it just that's going to kill it totally. Whereas you would have thought, and I was definitely thinking, obviously up until 10 o'clock that Tuesday morning, until it was announced that we'll probably win 4, 5, 6-0 today, like easily. And then obviously typical Sunderland things happen, and yeah, we literally killed all momentum. And then obviously the 2-week break doesn't help. And then playing the game, obviously we'll go through the game a bit later on, but it's obviously we're feeling the effects, shall we say?
Yeah. And obviously the fixture postponement just means that there's more fixtures to be crammed in at some point. And I think it's something like 30 games to be played in the next 120 days, which is like a game every 3 or 4 days. And John, what do you think needs to happen for the season to finish? Do you think we need the whole league need a 2-week break to kind of recover from COVID? Or do you think the season just simply needs extended by 3, maybe 4 weeks?
I think we should extend it. I don't think it'll be too bad. Obviously, not a lot of players are going to be playing in the Euros either, so there's not really any bad problems there. And we are talking about League One. Obviously, the Premier League's a little bit different and its own entity, and even the Championship. But with the way League One's gone, and they don't want to cancel it for some reason. So I'd say probably extend it for 4 weeks. But even then, will they do that? They just seem to be happy to shove the games in as and when and just carry on and get on with it almost.
Yeah. And Graham, obviously on paper, yesterday everyone was available, bar the ones with injuries. I think there was one player that Lee Johnson referred to in his conference before the game that had like a double dip from COVID, as he said. But pretty much Lee Johnson had, a full squad to choose from. But I'd imagine very limited training sessions, no game for 2 weeks. How much of an impact do you think that has on the fitness and sharpness of the players?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think everyone sort of commented on it for a change, I suppose social media wasn't awash with people being massively angry, which, with all due respect to Charles in this conversation, I suppose it normally would be if we got 0-0 draw away to a newly promoted side from League Two. But at the same time, that there's no time to waste, unfortunately, and I think that's what makes probably the Parkinson situation at the start of the season and those couple of games like MK Dons and stuff like that. You're probably feeling a little bit more positive and a little bit less on edge if you've won. If say you beat Wigan, say you beat, and I know that was a Johnson game, but I'm putting that down to Parkinson. But say you'd won, a couple of those games at home, maybe got a draw against Pompey, beat MK Dons, got a draw against Wigan, beat Wigan, and the league position looks a little bit more healthier. That the issue we have is COVID or no COVID, 2 days training or no 2 days training. Every draw and every dropping of points is getting us further and further away from the chase and pack, and it doesn't feel like last season where teams are able to be caught hugely. I don't think it's as bad as the Luton season was. Obviously, when we first came down, I don't think there's anyone running away with it. But there is a danger of people running away from us. And I think what I was probably most impressed with is that I think the likes of Phil Parkinson, maybe even Jack Ross to an extent, would have maybe looked at I'll say excuse, but I suppose it's not an excuse, but like he would have maybe gone on the side of, well, not much training, so on and so forth. I really quite like the fact that Lee Johnson didn't really seem to pull too many punches. He was like, well, yeah, there's mitigating circumstances, but essentially in a more professional way, it was still pretty average. I don't think we've got the time to basically blame stuff at the minute. Just get the points on the board, no matter which way it comes. But we're not out the promotion race just yet, not far from it. So hopefully we can get people fit and get firing as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, obviously we have no game until a week on Tuesday with the Fleetwood game postponed. Although, to me, it would make sense for one of our postponed games to get rescheduled for the Saturday. Whether the EFL are that forward thinking, I don't know. But like I say, as it stands, we don't have a game for another week. But it gives time for the players to get back into training and obviously work on the different tactics that Johnson really hasn't had too much time with the squad since taking charge, and there is already some signs of improvement. But Graham, do you think this upcoming break now will have a positive impact on the team? Obviously getting back to training, getting back to full fitness. Obviously Luke O'Neill and Denver Hume, I think they're back in training now, so it'll give them an extra, 7 to 10 days to recover. Do you think it'll have a positive impact on the squad going forward?
I think it's got to. I don't, again, just to kind of, sorry to repeat myself, but I don't think we have time for it not to work. The annoying thing for me, Lincoln game aside, and I can't really, the Wigan game was not a Johnson game. It just wasn't. You can't really say it wasn't. He's still implementing stuff. But the Lincoln aside, the games very much feel Parkinson-esque. We've got a lot of possession without actually doing anything with it. At this moment in time, I'm not going to panic or worry or anything like that. I think a lot of it's to do with everything that you've just mentioned, that Johnson hasn't really had time to probably stamp his mark in training, let alone in matches. So it gives him what's that, like 8 to 9 days. I kind of agree in a way. If I was part of the EFL, I'd be like, get a game in on that Saturday. But from a Sunderland perspective, I'd say have that 8-9 days to have conversations, to implement stuff, to get players a little bit fitter, to get players on the training pitch, and hopefully implement a little bit more of what we saw against Lincoln. I think it'll make a big difference when Lyndon Gooch comes back. I said yesterday when I was watching the game, when he came on, I kind of came out of my slumber a little bit. I think people might disagree with me, but I think Lyndon Gooch on form, a good Lyndon Gooch, is our best player far and wide. And I think as much as Jack Diamond's shown a lot of promise, Lyndon Gooch is twice the player he is. Jack Diamond's still very raw, so it gives a little bit more time to get the likes of Jordan Willis back and Lyndon Gooch back in. Obviously, match fitness is what they want, but we need to get them fit first and foremost to get that match fitness. So yeah, I think it should, but the proof is always in the pudding when we get towards, obviously, the Port Vale game's actually probably quite handy, because I don't think, much like the Oldham game, anyone really cares. I actually forgot it existed, truth be told. Still at that stage of the Pizza Trophy, or the Papa John's, or whatever it's called these days, where it's kind of like it's kind of a glorified friendly. So it's probably ideal for us to get 8 or 9 days training in, and then get a game in where you can play it at quite a less pressurised game than a league game, shall we say? So yeah, it should do. It should do.
Yeah. Well, what was a poor result for Sunderland yesterday was certainly a good one for Northampton in terms of points gained, and it's another point on the board, Charles. But what have you made of Northampton's season so far? Obviously, we are almost halfway into it.
I could probably echo everything that you guys have said about Sunderland, to be honest. Kind of feels like we've not really been, at the races for an awful lot of it. We've basically got a brand new squad, so it's, you've got a brand new manager, we've got a brand new squad, more or less. So it's taking its time to, to really develop and to become a team as such. So look, it was a good point against you guys yesterday. That's 4 points from the last 2 games for us now.
Yeah.
And that's a lot better than it was before Christmas, where we lost 4-0 twice on the bounce, and just before that we'd lost 2-1 to Crewe. So yeah, it's a good result.
Yeah. We'll look at the teams that started the game yesterday, and of course we will start with Northampton. Jonathan Mitchell started in goal, Lloyd Jones, Keane Bolger, Alan Sheehan, Sam Hoskins, Nicky Adams, Sean McWilliams, Ryan Watson, Jack Sowerby, Danny Rose, and Benny Ashley Seal. And Charles, looking at the side that started yesterday, was there any changes made or not made that surprised you?
No, we were unchanged from our win over Gillingham on Tuesday, and that's probably the biggest surprise. It's not very often that Keith Curle does that. He's known as the Tinker Man. He usually likes to chop and change, and the fact that he didn't, okay, there were a couple of differences on the bench, but I think that was more to the fact that players were coming back from illness or injury. So I was pleasantly surprised. I'd been asking for him to name an unchanged side, and the fact that he did, I wasn't expecting it. So I wonder how much we put down the fact that we played, I think, quite well. I mean, okay, yes, the game was boring, but we looked quite solid, I thought, as a team.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that is basically down to the fact playing 2 games in a row, everyone gets to know each other a bit better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I saw on Twitter as well somewhere about Ricky Holmes. I think he's allegedly been told he's not going to be offered a new contract due to the the limit in squad size. Do you think this would be a loss for Northampton this season?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're not quite sure exactly what's going on. I think it's more a case of we're being warned that he may not be able to be fitted in to the 22-man squad or whatever it is that you're restricted to these days. It depends what else or who else we can bring in. If we can bring somebody else in that is better or is a much more needed type of player, then it's one of those. But the fan base aren't going to be very happy if Ricky comes in. What does he do? Come in October, big fanfare, obviously returning to us. Mm-hmm. And then basically plays about 4 games, scores 1 goal, and then gets released. It just seems a bit typical Cobblers, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Danny Graham would be available if you'd fancy him at Northampton.
I'd fancy his name on paper. I'm not sure if he's actually the player he used to be, though, is he?
No, he's certainly not. I can tell you that for sure. We'll look at the Sunderland team. Started the game. Obviously, Lee Burge was back in goal. He was one of the players that were suffering from COVID symptoms, but it was good to see him back between the sticks. Conor McLaughlin at right back, a centre-back partnership of Tom Flanagan and Bailey Wright, with Dion Sanderson as the left-back for this game. The usual midfield 3 of Josh Scowen, Grant Ledbetter and Max Power, with a front 3 of Aidan McGeady, Jack Diamond and Charlie White. And I said earlier, McFadzean is presumed to be the player that was suffering from COVID symptoms, as Lee Johnson confirmed. But other than that, like I say, he had pretty much a full squad to pick from. It was the same side that started against Lincoln. And when you win a game like that, you usually don't make any changes. But given a long break between games, John, do you think it was the right decision to go with the same lineup?
He's obviously going on what he's seen in training and who's fit. Like Graham was saying, I think Gooch is probably our best player. And when he come on, he probably looked the most threatening out of anyone in the whole squad. I wasn't too surprised by the lineup. I didn't mind it, but I probably would have preferred with. I did tweet out before saying I prefer Gooch and Maguire to play. Obviously, it's hindsight, but it's just a standard Sunderland team, I think.
Yeah. And Graham, when you look at that starting 11, you've got Conor McLaughlin as your right back. You've got an incredibly slow midfield, and you've got Jack Diamond as the only real outlet in terms of pace. How important do you think it is for Sunderland and Lee Johnson in particular to bring someone in with that bit of pace?
I think it's been huge for about 4 or 5 seasons. I could probably go back to the David Moyes in the Premiership season. The lack of pace, the fact that no one's identified it is actually quite terrifying. I think even the most, someone who watches maybe 1 or 2 games a season could see something like a lot of pace. I'm very reluctant to ever give up on players, but I'm a little bit done in with Max Power. I don't really understand what he adds. He does have flashes of good performances where he'll put in 3 or 4 good games, and you think, and I don't want to be harsh on him because I think he cares, and I think he's evidently a very good lad, and he maybe he's in there for team spirit because obviously he seems to bring people together. And but on the pitch, he just doesn't really produce. I didn't think Jack Diamond did much yesterday, but I think we're probably expecting an awful lot from Jack Diamond, but he's probably in there because Lee Johnson probably sees the lack of pace and goes, well, Lyndon Kuchar's not fully fit. I've got this young lad that's a bit of a whippet. I might as well stick him in. But I think where we really lack pace is in the centre of the pitch. We've been missing it for years on end. The back 4 seem all right. I mean, Conor McLaughlin's had an okay season. Luke O'Nine's due to come back. Denver Hume's been okay. I wouldn't have a problem with McFadzean playing there either. I wouldn't have a problem with Dion Sanderson playing there. And I think, Willis and Bailey White are probably the best centre-half pairing on form in the league, or there's at least an argument for it. So I've got no real issue with that. But it's when you get into the midfield. I mean, Charlie White's scoring goals this season. I don't really have too many arguments if Will Grigg has given a run. Obviously, he's got that injury at the minute that could keep him out for the rest of the season, depending on the. But I think the rest of the squad, I think Charlie White's doing the business this season. I wouldn't panic too much. Danny Graham's obviously Danny Graham. So I wouldn't necessarily have any qualms if his wages got offloaded, because I think that obviously hasn't worked again. But in the midfield, there's just so much missing. And I think, I've had a bit of a go at Max Power there, but there was this big clamour to put Josh Scowen in for the start of the season about how great he was going to be, and the fact that he put 3 corners in. And again, I don't want to give up on anyone. He's been here little over a year and only played about 20 games, but I just don't see what Josh Scowen brings. He's not fast, he's small, he doesn't score goals, he misses a lot of chances, which is not his game. It's not his game, but if he's in those positions, I'd like to see him finish 1 or 2. I think he finished 1, and that was against Oldham with his head of all things. But I just think the midfield just lacks pace. It lacks someone to unlock the defence. I was really hoping that Elliot Embleton would really put his mark on the team over the next few games up until the January transfer window had opened. I wasn't impressed with him against Wimbledon. Difficult circumstances maybe, but it's got to a point with Embleton where I'm a bit like, is he anything more than a pretty decent League One player, if that? And I think what we need at the minute is a standout League One player. The one thing I'm pleased we didn't do is throw all our money at Marcus Maddison. I totally off topic, but I've never believed he was the right man. I don't think that kind of player is what we're missing. We're missing someone who's just like most League One teams have a person in the middle that's fast, powerful, and strong. We're just missing that. I think that's all we really are away from a decent team, if I'm completely honest. I don't think we're that far away. I just don't think we're close enough.
Yeah. And, I'm not going to claim he is that fast, powerful midfielder you're talking about, but obviously in our first season in League One, a player that was massively scapegoated by myself, by everyone, of course, was George Honeyman. And, if you look at the performances he's had at Hull since they dropped out in League One, and even some in the Championship last season, I think he's been in the League One team this season so far. He got another assist yesterday. He's got a couple of goals so far. It sounds strange to say, but do you think George Honeyman is the type of player that we are missing this season?
I mean, Honeyman, I never had any extra grind with Honeyman. In fact, I was a big fan of George Honeyman. Really, I don't know if it's just because I was in the company of him for half an hour, which is not enough time to make a judgment of him, but the guy really cared. He seemed to have a real understanding of the area, which you would do if you played this since you were 11. Honeyman, I would like to be part of the squad. I think that was very much another one of Stu Donald's maybe cost cutting. I mean, 250,000 for a player that's doing what he's doing in League One this season kind of stands to show that he's always been better than what a lot of Sunderland fans have thought. And obviously, opinion is opinion, but I always thought Honeyman brought an awful lot more at this level to Sunderland than a lot of fans give him credit for. But I'd like to see someone a bit bigger, a bit stronger, with maybe the same technical ability as George Honeyman. I would like to think we could attract someone better than George Honeyman. The people listening to this might say, well, who? What I would say to that is, my job's not recruitment, which is a very easy way to get out of it. But I'd like to see someone better than George Honeyman, but it's very much not a criticism of George Honeyman, because I was a real big fan of George Honeyman, an awfully big fan, in fact, to be honest. But I'd like to see someone a bit bigger, stronger, maybe with similar technical attributes, because George, you couldn't necessarily criticise his technical attributes. I think it was maybe his size. But I'd like to see someone a bit bigger and a bit stronger.
Yeah. And John, just quickly going back to Max Power, what did you make of his new haircut?
Well, I've got the same haircut, so it was absolutely smashing for me, but that's as far as my praise for Max Power goes, unfortunately.
Do you think that's where he got his inspiration from?
Yeah, it could be, mate. It could be.
Well, Northampton got the game underway, and, from start to finish, Sunderland dominated possession, but didn't really create anything with it. And, that's been an issue for Sunderland from a while in this league, and, even going back to the season in the Championship and in the Premier League. But Charles, is that how you kind of viewed the game from a Northampton perspective? Sunderland had a lot of the ball, and they kept recycling possession, but were you ever really worried about Sunderland getting something?
I think there were maybe two moments in the match where I was a bit worried. That was when I think it was McGeady crossed and Scowen basically got, I think, muscled off the ball, and the ball just went straight past the front of the goal. And then the other one was when I think it was Charlie Wyke. There was a bit of a bouncing around in our 6-yard area, and somehow he toe poked it over the bar. That was it, really. Yeah, more or less. You had a bit of the ball, but didn't really do much with it. I didn't think. I was disappointed. I'll be honest. As a fan of a lower league club, and I know that, look, at the end of the day, sorry boys, but Sunderland deserve to be in League One based on performances and other issues that you've had, right?
Yeah. We're
We're in the same league for a reason. But I expected more. And you do from any sort of big side. It'll be the same as when, we finally face Ipswich. I'll expect more than what they actually give us, because you're big clubs at this level, and you should be not necessarily walking away with the league title, but you should be up there challenging for it all the way through the season every year, and you're just not doing it, and whatever that reason is. But when you look at who's in your team, and on paper, that squad is too good for League One. So I was disappointed, I'll be honest with you. I was expecting, I predicted a 1-1 draw. I'm kind of glad that I got the result right, if not the scoreline. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, actually, we'll get drubbed here. As much as I want a draw, we'll get a drubbing and we'll get annihilated. And actually, you just didn't. Aidan McGeady was, I thought, your most technically gifted, if you like, player on the pitch. And he showed a couple of, good bits of skill and control, but Sam Hoskins seemed to have him in his pocket. So... yeah, I was quite surprised when he got taken off, in fairness. I did think if anything was going to come, it was going to be through McGeady. But it's just an odd one for me. I just look at it and I just think you should be better than you actually are. But I think we kind of matched you, not necessarily through when you look through like possession stats and all of that side of it. But, I think it was, 10 shots to 8 that you edged it. I think chances wise, we had a good couple of chances. You had a good couple of chances. Either of us could have nicked it, I think. So a draw was fair, but I was a bit disappointed in Sunderland.
Yeah. And I said to Graham before there about the lack of pace in the Sunderland squad. Do you think that, obviously Lyndon Gooch, he is coming back from an injury. He wasn't going to start the game for us. But do you think if Sunderland had a few more, I suppose, pacey players on the pitch, a few more people with, a bit more athleticism, do you think that would have caused you a bit more trouble?
It's hard to say, really. I mean, Lee Johnson mentioned it after the game. He said something about the pitch, which every manager does, and he's right.
Yeah.
The pitch is a disgrace. Don't get me wrong, but there's reasons for that, and we're not in control of it. And if COVID wasn't here, the pitch wouldn't be as bad as it is. So both sides have got to play it. I don't think pace would have really made a difference. We've got some quick lads. I mean, Sean McWilliams, who was our man of the match, he kept tackling back. He kept running back and tackling. And, I know what you're saying about if there was maybe a bit more pace, then maybe they wouldn't have got caught like that. But Sean McWilliams is really, really quick. And then he's good in the tackle as well. And he basically stopped you playing. Most of the times when, admittedly, we just gave you the ball and went, there you go, boys, do what you can. Sean McWilliams, 2 seconds later, was winning the ball back or at least breaking up the play. So, it's a tough one. I think against other opposition, and I think playing at the Stadium Light, where I'm presuming the pitch is wider and is plusher than ours, maybe. Yeah, but on the performance that I saw, it's too hard to tell whether that's the thing that you need to do. I think, like you were saying earlier, guys, you need to give Johnson a chance and just let him bed in. Playing Saturday, Tuesday, there's Keith Curle's said to us that essentially he's not getting any time to do anything other than fitness work with the players, rest and recovery. That's it. So tactics and stuff like that is just getting left to the players themselves, more or less.
Yeah. Well, while Sunderland's performance wasn't great, and this might sound to be a bit biased, but the officials never appear to have much control of the game. Obviously, Wyke was booked early on for blocking the goalkeeper's kick, which I don't think they actually showed it very well on the stream, because obviously there is one cameraman, so you don't really see it. But he was booked for it. Fair enough, you don't block it. But then Northampton went down the other end and did pretty much the exact same thing, and the referee didn't even stop play, which I found interesting. But 40 minutes in, Northampton wanted a penalty. Ryan Watson went down under pressure from Lee Burge, and the referee booked him for simulation, which at the time I thought was possibly a bit harsh to book him for simulation, but at the same time I don't think it was a penalty. But like I say, you can't make excuses for the result, but when officials are as poor as they appeared to be to me yesterday, Graham, how do you think that affects the mentality of the players? Do you think they start to become frustrated when they don't get the decisions that they should probably be getting?
I think a big part of what I've absolutely hated about League One since probably last season has been there's teams in this league that, and I don't think Northampton did this for the record, I really don't, but I think there's teams in this league that know how to work a referee and know how to basically piss Sunderland off. What I was looking forward to in the sense of having no fans was that away teams at the Stadium Light and teams at home couldn't maybe get used to fans to get on the back of the referee or change the atmosphere within a stadium or a ground. And yet for some reason, looking back in hindsight, I don't know whether that really matters what the fans think, because the referee's still really quite bad. I think I can accept when a referee makes a mistake. I think that's relatively normal, especially with, people make mistakes with VAR, for crying out loud. The referees at this level don't have any help whatsoever, really. But for 3 seasons now, I've just seen horrendous refereeing on a continuous basis. What frustrates me the most is that Sunderland don't really seem to react to it. We haven't used it ever to our advantage. We haven't ever seemed to got used to bad decisions. I wish we would just put teams away, without having to worry about refereeing decisions. But we're sometimes so average that you look at refereeing decisions. The one you referred to with Charlie Wyke, I watched them both back and I tried to make a head and a tail just because the game was that boring, to be honest. I was trying to look at both of them and go, well, what's the difference here? And there wasn't one really. I think there's a reason referees are at this level and not in the Premier League. And it's probably the fact that they're just not as good as ones in the Premier League or the Championship. The Championship level referees were pretty bad, to be fair, but so was Sunderland. So that was definitely not an excuse that time. But I wish Sunderland would just put teams away to the point where referees won't even need to be spoke about. And I don't mean win 4-0 every game. That's just not realistic. It's never going to happen. But we just seem to be getting further and further away from automatic promotion, which, let's be honest, when we came down here, that's exactly what we were all going for. And we were going for that up until, 5 games from the final game of the season. It was just a case of Barnsley were better than us at that time and have gone on to prove they're a better side in general. I mean, still in the Championship, so of course. But I just wish we would put teams away on a more regular basis, because when you're 2 to 3-0 up, you don't really care about those things. But I think Sunderland are that, or have been that unimaginative over the past year. Again, I'll not attribute that to Johnson at all, but probably because of the Parkinson and the feeling that we've been in a pause mode for about a year. I think we looked at things like, if that referee decision, would we be 3 points ahead? Would we be this? I'm hoping Lee Johnson is the kind of man that goes, well, bollocks to referee decisions. The referees are shite at this level, but Sunderland aren't. So we're going to put teams away. But the simple fact is, Sunderland are so poor at times, and so that's the thing. I'm saying poor. We're not. We're not poor. We're just so bland. We'd have a load of possession and do naught with it, which is so easy to defend against. Which is why I think Keith Curl said yesterday with Northampton, we didn't really carve them open. He's not wrong. We didn't even get close to it. It was the closest chance was Charlie White, which was the ball bobbling around the box, which is probably what we were expecting from Northampton, let alone us. Hopefully Lee Johnson changes that. Hopefully Lee Johnson, maybe we do a show in 4 or 5 weeks, and you ask me the same question, and I go, why do you care? We won 4-0. We just battered a team. We played great football. When we beat Lincoln, no one even thought about it. It's almost like because we're not quite good enough to win games on a regular basis at this level, which is the fact. We look at things like that, kind of, I wouldn't say clutch at straws, but we're going, if the referee was a bit better. Unfortunately, I think it's proven over the 3 years they're not. They're not better. They get just as bad every week. They're inconsistent. I wouldn't say joke, their profession, that's quite hard, but they're not the best. They're really not the best. And I don't know why that is, because it's still a third division English football. They should be at least decent, but they're very different to maybe the slightly more consistent refereeing that we've seen in the Premier League. But I'd like to just think that it's never going to be a talking point with Sunderland. We put teams away a bit more often. Unfortunately, we're not quite good enough to do that, so we do look at things like that.
Yeah. In Charles, obviously, Northampton didn't do this, but a lot of the teams that, like the lower placed teams in the league that we played this season, they do sit back, and they don't play football, the time waste. And I'm not saying Northampton did that, because they certainly didn't, but Sunderland didn't create anything yesterday. And, for the last few weeks, defensively, they've been really shaky. I think any Sunderland fan would tell you that. Obviously, Bailey Wright, ever since he signed on loan, really, he's been hailed as our best defender and possibly one of the best defenders in the league on paper, but even he's been quite shaky recently. Do you think Northampton could have done a bit more on the attack yesterday and troubled Sunderland more?
I don't really think we've got the players to have done any more than what we did. Decision making is what it came down to for us. Ryan Watson had a chance. I think it was early on in the second half. He drew, I think, 3 defenders towards him, and Nicky Adams was pretty much open, just a couple of yards to his left. And if he'd found him rather than taking his pretty wild stab in the dark shot that went wide, then we could have nabbed a goal there. But I don't think we created enough to really, do anything to deserve taking home the points. Just wanted to give a different perspective on the couple of things you were talking about before. So like the charge down of the goalkeeper thing, Graham said that he doesn't think that there was any difference between Charlie Wykes and Danny Rose. I think the clear difference was the fact that Charlie Wyke was going towards our goalkeeper as he kicks it out. And Danny Rose has got his back to him, and he's actually physically, obviously looking to get out of the way. Now, I'm not saying that it shouldn't, that the play should have carried on. I think the rule is that the ball is still technically in the goalkeeper's possession until it's been cleared. So I think it should have been a free kick. But there was a difference between the two. I think that the Charlie Wyke incident was just much more obvious and therefore blatant. And then with the penalty, again, I'm not saying that it was a penalty, but because Ryan Watson was looking for it. But having said that, he did get his feet taken out from underneath him. And on Tuesday night against Gillingham, exact same thing happened, and we got given a pen.
Yeah.
So there's that consistency as what Graham was talking about before. But welcome to League One, guys.
Exactly,
If you're not
yeah.
used to it yet, then that's it. At the end of the day, you've got professional football players playing a game of football with a semi-pro referee.
Yeah.
That's the problem with English refereeing in this country, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've touched on it quite well there, to be fair. I don't think it's necessarily the standard of refereeing. Like, obviously, look at some of the decisions yesterday. Was it a penalty? Was it not a penalty? I don't know. Should White have been booked? Should Danny Rose have been booked? I don't know. But it more comes down to the lack of consistency for me as to why the referee gets so much stick. Because as you say there, you've got a penalty, exact same thing. But yesterday you could diving. White, it is slightly different because I know Danny Rose did duck when Burge was clearing it. But to me, he looked like he kind of stopped in front of him. He was moving away, but he saw him kicking it. He did stop. It's just a lack of consistency for me. And John, is that, we've spoke about referees so many times in these podcasts, but every week they seem to just throw something up and just outdo themselves, don't they?
Yeah, it seems to be most weeks, but again, it's like what Graham said. We keep giving ourselves performances that we're talking about referees. Like you say, when we beat Lincoln, I don't think anyone mentioned the referee. We drew yesterday, and it's referee was poor, referee was this, and even though I thought the referee was absolutely shocking after that one tackle right by the dugouts. I don't even think it was given as a free kick.
Yeah.
And even Ledbetter went in on the referee, and the referee just wasn't having it. But it's just a consistency, and if, like you say, if we're winning games, not like Graham's like 4-0, as long as we're winning games, no one's going to care. But we've got to get used to it, and I can't believe we're not used to it by now because everyone else knows how to play the game, and we don't seem to be able to.
Yeah. And John, when you look at our side and our squad, we have a lot of players that do the same role as others, and it's clear to see, whilst the management in recent years hasn't helped, the players aren't good enough. Some of them, you look at the likes of George Dobson, Will Grigg, Danny Graham, and you could go on for hours talking about the players who might come good but aren't now. We all hold on to hope that they will suddenly turn good, especially Will Grigg. We all hope that one day, he's going to score a hat-trick and go on to score 30. But, it's his second, maybe even third season in League One now. We need to go up at some point. It's as simple as that. Do you think January now is the time that we should be looking at selling some of them and, bringing in possibly some younger players, for the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think selling them is going to be a strong term because I don't think a lot of them are going to command money. Obviously, with Grigg, there's the potential. It sounds like there's a bad injury coming, so he'll probably be out the rest of the season, which means no one's going to want to take him. As for Dobson, again, I don't think anyone's really going to pay for them. We've seen the squad so one-dimensional, like Ledbetter, Power and Scowen. We've got the same. They're just all the same. We need, like we said, we need a bit of pace, we need a bit of power, and he noticed that in his first game. Do you know what I mean? So what have the guys in charge been doing, for these last couple of years? But definitely, obviously, Lee Johnson must have been promised something because he must have seen the team and thought, what am I supposed to do? Even the performance yesterday was still a bit Phil Parkin-esque, wasn't it? It was very just one-dimensional. And that was it. We need different ideas. We need plan Bs. You know what I mean? We need someone up front with a bit of pace and who can hold the ball up, who's strong. We need someone else to bring on who's a different dynamic. Those are sort of things in January we do need to address. Obviously, it's January now. These are sorts of things that literally should be in place and ready to go. Look at the striker yesterday. I can't remember his name for Northampton. He held the ball up absolutely superb against our defenders, and you tell me the one time Charlie White held the ball up, he didn't all game. And we would say Charlie White is probably levels above, the Northampton striker, but Northampton striker, to his credit, had our defenders all over the place. And Charlie White has been in form recently, but yesterday, in COVID or no COVID, and you still got to be able to hold the ball up and bring others into play. That's mainly our game, but it just didn't happen at all.
Yeah. Obviously, it is January now, and the transfer window is open. How quickly Sunderland will do business, we'll never know. But Carl Winchester, his name that's been linked with Sunderland over the last few days, obviously from Forest Green, and I think he has worked with Lee Johnson. I think it was at Oldham, I believe. And I think John Mellish from Carlisle was very loosely linked as well. But there's two defensive midfielders linked with a side that already have scoring power, Ledbetter, Dobson, potentially even Dan Neil to play in that role. Graham, do you think this is an area we need to improve in, or do you think other positions need to take priority?
Depends what he's like. And I'm not going to say I know anything about him. Football Manager, I know a lot about him. Signed him for years when he was decent. But as a, in real life, I've got no clue. I would like to think he's a bit more. Well, we had on my podcast we had the Bristol City correspondent on, and he said he likes like a small midfielder, which panics me a little bit because I don't think there's many players better than the likes of Dylan McGeoch at this level, who obviously we sold last year because he didn't fit into the team. I don't know enough about Carl Winchester, to be honest. He's at Forest Green Rovers, who've been probably punching above their weight in League Two for a little while, doing quite well, because obviously they're a tiny, tiny club, no offence, but they are. And he's obviously their best player by the sounds of it. It sounds like that one's almost done from what I've heard. I just hope it's a bit different. But again, it goes back to maybe when you asked me about Honeyman. I want someone who's better than Honeyman. Do I think Carl Winchester is going to be better than Honeyman? No. I can't go against George Dobson because that's my... that I've got a love in with George Dobson. Not because of his ability as a player, I'll tell you that. But I just think there is something that needs to be changed in midfield. I'm not sure if it's in defensive midfield, because I think Ledbetter does a job. I think if you want an anchor man, someone to... Because from what I've read, Winchester is someone who will sit in an anchor man position and sort of dictate play as best he can. I think you're not going to get much better than Grant Ledbetter at this level. I mean, maybe one or two players that are better, but I think he does the job. I think what we really need to be replacing is taking the likes of Scowen and Max Parra out of the situation and having someone that can break the lines, someone that can show a bit of pace. Lee Johnson spoke about it. The most encouraging thing about the past few weeks, Lincoln aside, has been the fact that Lee Johnson seems to have identified it and quite brazenly said it in press conferences. So I think if it doesn't come to fruition, I don't think it's because Lee Johnson doesn't want it to. It's encouraging that he's got people. What are we on today? The 3rd of January. That's It's quite encouraging that he has targets. Basically, what it sounds like, signed and ready to go. I wouldn't mind Mellish at all. Not just because he enjoys the Barini celebration, but if Twitter's anything to go by. But he's scoring goals for Carlisle. But
as well, didn't he, in the cup?
He did. So he did, and I mean he's been banging them in on a weekly basis. I'd like to see another striker come in, especially if Will Grigg's injured. I think we probably have to because Danny Graham's, it's just never worked for him at Sunderland. It might have worked elsewhere, but it just doesn't work at Sunderland. Charlie Wyke, I trust to score another 10 goals in the second half of the season, which might be a bit of a hot take, but I do sort of trust that he can. But it'd be nice to have someone that can, if he doesn't, sort of go alongside him maybe, or give us another option, or kind of cover him if he gets a bad injury. I think it's probably forward planning. So, why not if we can get him at a good price? But I think realistically, like I said before, I think we're one decent, pacey, strong, powerful player in the middle away from a decent side. I've criticised Sunderland a lot, but I honestly think the amount of games that we absolutely dominate possession-wise, if we had someone that could break the lines, we've probably got all that we really need. Who that player would be, I don't know. If I'm completely honest, I would be looking at a championship player that's maybe not getting in his current side, maybe a top 10 championship side, a player that's on the fringes of his first team that would maybe come on loan and want to improve for 6 months and think, well, I can go back to my parent club in 6 months and do well, or I can do well at Sunderland. My parent club don't want me in that, and Sunderland sign me when they get promoted, hopefully. But it's difficult because I can't imagine scouting's outside of watching a game on TV, a recorded game, is that easy, because I can't imagine they're letting much in to scout games and stuff like that. I'm assuming it'll be 2 teams and a couple of media people. I can't imagine scouts are being let in that freely. So you'd like to think, I think that's probably why Lee Johnson's going with people that he knows in Winchester. But I think you'll have someone up his sleeve. I do think in January we will bring in someone with pace. He's mentioned it a few times in his press conferences. He's mentioned it in his post-match and his every time we spoke pretty much. So I'd be really surprised if he doesn't. And I think, once McGeady's up to speed, I think, Charles commented before, McGeady looks like the one player that's going to make something happen, which is Sunderland 2 years ago, really. I think once McGeady's back up to speed, he hasn't played in like a year, apart from 3 games he's had now with COVID layoff. I think once McGeady gets a bit in his legs, McGeady's far above this level, even at the age of 34. So there's another key to unlock the door of League One defence, if you prefer. Add another person to it. I think we'll be there or thereabouts. I'm not as downbeat as maybe I should be, but at the same time, it's got to happen. It's got to happen fast.
Yeah. We will move into the player ratings from yesterday's game, and as always, we will start at the back with Lee Burge, who I don't think he had anything to do. I think the only time he was really mentioned was obviously when Watson went down in the penalty box under pressure from him. So, generic 6 out of 10, starting 2021 off with a 6 out of 10. John, for you?
Yeah, I've gone with 6, quite run of the mill, clean sheet. You can't ask for more than that.
And Graham, for you, Lee Burge?
Yeah. I think probably one of those players that I'm not going to say unsung hero because I don't think there is any, but I was a bit worried about Lee Burge going into the season, especially after the Bristol Rovers the first 3 minutes. I think he's been steady. I think he's all right. He does a job. He's not John McLaughlin, but you don't need a John McLaughlin, I suppose, in hindsight. I'll give him a 7. I think a clean sheet's always deserving of a 7, even though he didn't have much to do.
Yeah. Conor McLaughlin started at right back, and I say it every week. I just don't think he suits the role particularly well, especially for a Sunderland side that struggle to create going forward. And for me, when O'Nien gets fit, I know he's back in training. When O'Nien's back at match fitness, he goes straight back into the side for me. I didn't think he offered anything going forward, really. I think he might have put 1 or 2 decent crosses into the box yesterday, but other than that, going forward, he didn't do much. Defensively, he did nothing wrong. So I've given him a 5 out of 10. Possibly a bit harsh, but John, for you?
Yeah, I've gone for a 5 as well. I thought he was quite poor going forward, and he failed to stop a few crosses as well, which annoyed me. Interesting to see get Luke O'Nien back in now. Probably with how well Sanderson played, obviously on his wrong side, I'd probably go with him on the right side because I thought he was decent, and he'd be a shoo-in for me and take McLaughlin out.
Do you think it could be an option if we were to do that? You say Dion Sanderson, Jordan Willis, Bailey Wright, and maybe Denver Hume at the back. Think O'Nien could come into the midfield and possibly give us something different?
Yeah, definitely with his energy, and he's popped up with more goals than most of them. So yeah, why not? Different dimension.
Yeah. And Graham, for you, Conor McLaughlin?
6 out of 10. He's average, isn't he? He's had a better season than last season, but that's like it's rubbish last season, so it's not really hard. On the Luke O'Nien thing, I think he's going to come back in when he's fit, but for me, Luke O'Nien's not a right back. Dion Sanderson's already a centre back. It'd be nice if we had an actual right back. Do we want to spend money on a right back in this January window when other areas are more important? I don't know. So I would probably, John, I wouldn't actually mind putting 9 in midfield and sticking Dion Sanderson at right back because I think he looked okay. Just obviously he's right-footed, so he kept cutting in. But Scotland's been okay. He's been very average. Last season he was horrendous, like almost all of the time. So 6 for me. Nothing wrong. Nothing massively right.
Yeah. And moving on to Bailey Wright. He's been shaky. Pretty well. I suppose since Clay Johnson's came in, he's looked a little yard off the pace. He's looked a little bit. He looks like he's lacking that little bit of confidence. There was a few times he was caught in possession again. Most of the game, he dealt with what he had, but again, 5 out of 10 for me, John.
I've gone for 6. I thought he was okay. He was a little bit erratic, like you say. He's a bit, maybe his confidence gone a little bit, but I thought he was okay.
Graham, for you?
Very similar, 6. I don't think Bailey Wright's been because he was at maybe the back end of last season or whatever what last season was, and the start of this season. But I'm sure I'll be able to share my opinion when we get onto the next defender as to the reason for that. In my opinion, I would give him a 6 again. Very Conor McLaughlin-esque. Nothing majorly wrong. Nothing.
Yeah. You've kind of want me to give my rating for this next player now. We'll go with Tom Flanagan. I've always criticised him a little bit because for a professional footballer, he can't pass the ball. And Sunderland trying to play it out from the back. When that doesn't work, we do seem to lump it forward. And I think that happened quite a lot yesterday. We lumped it forward to Charlie Wyke, who didn't really hold the ball up and it just came back towards us. And, a lot of the possession was just in the middle of the pitch. But I'm not sure what Graham's going to say. But I'm just going to go with a 6 out of 10 for Flanagan. And John, I'm going to start with you.
I've actually gone for a 5. I thought his defending was actually really good, but he didn't have frustrate me with his distribution, and it just brings attacks on to us, and we don't need that. Just play a simple ball. Normally, he's got Denver Hume out there. Maybe I don't know if he didn't want to give it to Sanderson because obviously he's on the wrong side, but just give it easy. Do you know what I mean? And stop putting us under pressure.
Graham, for you.
Flanagan. I said something yesterday when I was watching the game. Now I tweeted. I know this will come back to haunt me. I tweeted in the summer when he signed a new contract. I was happy with it. He's all right in the back three. I think he's actually quite good. I think he worked quite well with Denver Hume. But I think overall, we don't suit a back three, and obviously Johnson's not going to play that. It's just got to a point where I've kind of give up on Flanagan. I keep believing that he's going to be something, and sometimes with his passing ability, he goes from Sergio Busquets to Steve Biscuits within minutes. There was I can't remember what game it was. I think it was Wickham last year. Cruyff turned one of their strikers and then beat a couple of their players, passed the ball back, and then went 1-2 and then launched it 30 yards out of play. And it was just I think he seems like a nice lad. I've got a lot of respect for the fact that whenever there's a bit of a melee and a bit of a battle, he's always at the front of it. I quite like that. It proved that he likes to protect his teammates, proof that he cares. And I'd never say he's one of the worst centre-halves I've ever seen, but when it really comes down to it, if Sunderland want to go up this season, automatic playoffs at any level, if you've got Tom Flanagan in a back four, I don't think it's going to happen. He's a good backup. That's about it. He's a good backup across. I wouldn't mind him filling in 10 games a season, but I think he makes Bailey Wright look worse, and I think he's so far beneath Jordan Willis. It's ridiculous. Jordan Willis is good passing, good at getting forward, decent defending, pacey. One of the better defenders in this league, Jordan Willis, I would say. And I don't think I'm going too far of a stretch there. I think, again, I've touched before, Bailey Wright and Jordan Willis next to each other. I would be more than happy with that, even for lower end championship, to be honest. But Flanagan's he's a backup defender that has played far too many games for my liking, and I think I've waited for him to come good because you can see there's something there. You can see it. I spoke to MK Dons fans a couple of times over the past few years, and they all went, it always felt like he was going to be all right, but he wasn't quite. And that's how I feel about Flanagan. And it's got to a point where Sunderland have been in League One, for 2.5 seasons now. I just want players that are going to get us out of it, and Flanagan ain't one of them.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, especially when you play back four, especially yesterday, you've got Conor McLaughlin who can't run. Bailey Wright's not the quickest, and Tom Flanagan's certainly not the quickest. I think if you do play a back four, you've got Bailey Wright as the leader, I suppose. He's the forefront of your defence. He's the one going to be making the tackles, winning the balls in the air. And there is times where Bailey Wright's going to get caught out. At the end of the day, he's a League One defender. He will get caught out. But when you've got Tom Flanagan next to him, you're just never going to recover. And I think that's one of the reasons that I suppose Jordan Willis is a little bit underrated. I know some fans don't like him, and he does make mistakes. But I think when you have Jordan Willis alongside someone, he just offers you that cover, that bit of pace. If someone alongside him makes a mistake, which at this level, when you're playing 46 games in the league and God knows however many in the cup, you will make mistakes. I think having that bit of pace next to him is going to be vital. But Deon Sanderson, obviously he's played a couple of games since COVID, really. He played out of position at left back yesterday, and I thought he was one of our standout players, I suppose. He got forward okay at times, and as I touched on there, a bit of pace, a bit of athleticism at the back. We've drawn 0-0 away to Northampton. possibly a generous rating given the result, but I've went with a 7 out of 10 for Sanderson. John?
Yeah, I've got a 7 as well. I thought he was steady and good going forward as well. Just like they said, the only thing, every time he got the ball, he obviously had to check back when crossing. So our forwards were probably already in the box making their run. So that was probably the only thing. So I'd like to see him on the other side. But yeah, 7 for me.
Yeah. And Graham, for you?
Sort of similar to you guys. I thought he was okay. I think I've gone for a 6 because I think he probably just stuck out a bit more because we were so bland and the game was so boring, and we don't know a great deal about him because we haven't seen him that much. And he looked, pacey. He looked steady on the ball, strong. He didn't do anything. He didn't do, and that's not his fault. He's playing at left back. He's a right foot centre half. But it was just, he just looked the best of a bad bunch, I suppose. Maybe 6.5 potentially, but I would have liked to seen him do probably a bit more than what he did for me to go any higher. But positive for him. I think he impressed a few people with his performance. I think people now see him as someone who could come into the team. So I'm going to go for 6. But I think potential was shown, yes.
Yeah. And Grant Ledbetter, once again, started in his normal holding midfield role. And you can pretty much copy and paste every week what I say about him in these player ratings. He dictated the play, played some neat football, played some neat passes, didn't really do anything wrong, slowed the game down at times a little bit too much. But like I say, 6 out of 10 pretty much every week I've given. So yeah, John?
Yeah, I've gone for a 6 as well. Okay performance. Like you say, just kept it ticking over. Gave the ball away once or twice, but you got to expect that. But yeah, he was okay.
Graham, for you?
I'm a big Grant Ledbetter fan. Have been since he first came through in his first spell. Wasn't his greatest game yesterday, but not because he was bad. It was just nothing really came off, and the people in front of him didn't do enough. I think similar to what you said, copy and paste for Grant Ledbetter. He's consistent. 6 for me yesterday, which puts him in the same bracket as Conor McLaughlin. So sorry for that, Grant. But I think nothing wrong. Nothing hugely right, but that's probably more down to the people in front of him not doing enough with the balls that he played in. I think it was him that created the one and only chance from Charlie Wyker. I think it was his set piece. So I'm going to say 6, but I think one of those passes that he put through in the game, if Charlie Wyke heads in that set piece, you say 7 because then you get an assist. So whether it's Grant's fault he's not a bit higher, I don't think so. 6 for me, but I think he was fine.
Yeah. Josh Scowen started alongside him in midfield and picked up what was possibly a harsh yellow card quite early in the first half, but from then on his poor performance went downhill and slightly improved in the second half. But his crossing's been very poor, and it has been ever since he was brought into the starting lineup. Really, he's wasteful in possession and he's just very weak to be playing in a midfield alongside Max Power and Ledbetter. As Graham said before, I think you do need a mix in midfield. Whereas we've seen they've got Scowen, Power, Ledbetter. They're all quite similar players. None of them are going to break a gut going forward. So 5 out of 10. I'll give Josh Scowen based on the 90 minutes yesterday, John.
I've actually gone with a 4. I thought he was really poor. I thought he was poor on the ball. Gave away silly fouls even after his booking, even though it might have been a little bit harsh. And poor finishing as well. I think one cross across the box. He doesn't seem to have the desire to go and put it in. Literally put your whole body, against it. Like you said, he's just a bit weak. And yeah, that annoyed me as well. So I've gone with a very low 4. Sorry, Josh.
Graham, for you?
I'm just not a fan of Josh Scowen at all. Not even slightly. 4 for me. But most weeks it's 4 or 5 for me with Josh Scowen. I just don't know what he is. Like, he's not a defensive midfielder, which we were told he was. He was one of those players that would break up play, and yet he seems to be playing in an advanced midfield position. I don't think I trust him in either. I think it was Parkinson that said it was between him and Maguire vying for a place on the right. Like,
yeah.
And what planet was that? Like, that for me, I would never criticise someone too harshly, but for me, Josh Scowen is just not what we need at all. He's a 4 for me this week, but he's never been higher than a 5.
Yeah. Max Power made up the midfield, and obviously he is team captain. I think they'd better still club captain. And again, just kind of similar to Josh Scowen, wasteful in possession, crossing when he occasionally got forward wasn't great. He's a very frustrating player to watch. I've said so many times, he'll play a 2-yard pass to Bailey Wright. He'll then run back towards Bailey Wright to get the ball back off him, and then play it to Tom Flanagan and just rinse and repeat. And he is quite if he does go forward, he can offer a little bit. Obviously, I think he had I'm not going to say it was a chance, it was more of an effort in the first half from 20 or 30 yards where Mitchell's, saved quite easily. But other than that, I didn't really bring anything to the game. So again, 5 out of 10 for me, John.
I've gone with a 4. I thought he was the same as Scowen. I thought it was poor, and he just goes missing almost. I don't want to say hides, but it's almost like positively hiding, just not really taking any responsibility despite being the captain. So yeah, 4 for me.
Graham?
Really hard for me to disagree with what John said there. I said 4 as well. Max Power's an interesting player in the least interesting sense, because he's, in a sense, I get frustrated more at Max Power because I know he can produce so much more, and I know he's so much better than what he produces on a regular, consistent basis, which is relatively average stuff. And do you think, whether he intends to, he does hide a little bit? I agree with John on that. I think he does. I don't know if this sounds ridiculous or if it sounds like it makes sense, but I'm going to say it anyway. For me, the minute Max Power realizes he's not as good as he thinks he is when he'll become a better player, because he's very good at very, very basic things. And sometimes he thinks he can do the things that are not basic. He thinks he can do the 40-yard Hollywood pass, and he thinks he can do all sorts of different things. He's a very decent League One player. Based on his record before he came to Sunderland, a very, very good League One midfielder that's gained a couple of promotions. But for some reason, he seems to think that running around, hitching up his captain's armband and pinging 40-yard passes out of play makes him a better player. He's not that good. And it's not a problem that he's not that good. If he keeps doing the basic stuff, he's actually pretty decent. He can score a goal. We've seen that. He's got a decent shot on him. Yep. His range of passing is not that great, but when he keeps it simple and passes it, that's fine. I think he needs to remember, and I don't think I'm the first person to say this, he's not Steven Gerrard, and he's not even in the mould of Steven Gerrard. He needs to get that out of his head a little bit, and stop being a really, really bad version of him. He's a better player than what he's shown, but not as good as he thinks. He's a 4 for me.
Is he more of a Frank Lampard? Which one do you rate higher, Gerrard or Lampard?
As a Rangers man, I've got to say Steven Gerrard, I think. So. But I would have probably said Lampard over the two, if I'm completely honest. From an England perspective, neither Paul Scholes. Thank you very much.
I'll agree with that one.
Yeah.
The first of the 3 attackers was Jack Diamond, and against Lincoln, and I think it was against Wimbledon. I gave him man of the match in both games. He had the pace, he could beat his man. He got a great goal against Lincoln, and just all around good performance against Wimbledon. But yesterday, he tried the right things. He tried to get forward, but I think he needs a little bit more to his game. I think he needs to mature a little bit as a player. He was pushed off the ball a lot. Anyone watching the game could tell when he was going to cut inside or when he was going to take a heavy touch outside. He lost the ball a lot, and I think a few people give him a higher rating than he deserved, purely because he's young, he's coming through the academy, and we've been crying out for him to play for so long. But purely based off his performance yesterday and nothing else, I've given him a 5 out of 10 again. John?
Yeah, I've gone for a 5 as well. Decision making still leaves a lot to be desired. And there was one time, I think Ledbetter absolutely bollocked him off because we were on the attack like Nagidi against Lincoln, and he seemed to turn and just knock it back to McLaughlin in the right back position. And Ledbetter went absolutely mental at him. So he needs to learn those types of things. Because if we go, we were probably outnumbering them going forward, and then you score that goal, and obviously that's the difference. So if he's going to play in, ahead of Gooch, which he is at the moment, then he's got to buck his ideas up a little bit with his decision making. But yeah, 5 for me.
Graham, for you?
Same, 5. Jack Diamond kind of reminds me of Lyndon Gooch 4 years ago. Like a bit raw, a bit rough around the edges. Definitely something there. Can you mould it? I think it was going to happen. I think he played really well against Lincoln in the 45 minutes he was on the pitch, and really well in the game against, I think, was it Oldham? Yeah, it was Oldham. But it was always going to happen that eventually he was going to... We've seen a lot of players come through and we've been excited by them. Duncan Watmore was a big one. We were really excited when he first came through, and then he got those injuries, and then all of a sudden he turned into someone that we couldn't wait to release, and that he's doing well in the Championship. I think Jack Diamond's going to follow it a similar way, unfortunately. I think a lot of people rate him really highly. I think he's going to get a lot more chances. Naturally, a kid his age, 20, 21, he's not going to be perfect, and he's so raw. He's so far from the finished article. He's going to have games like Saturday. He's going to have games where you go, I wish he was just a bit stronger. I really wish he'd made that decision. I think it's going to take a lot of patience. I really hope Lee Johnson doesn't start him in the next game, and I hope Lyndon Gooch plays, because I think Lyndon Gooch is probably where Jack Diamond can get to, which is probably what a lot of Sunderland fans are thinking, God, I hope he can be better, but this is the level we're at, and I think Lyndon Gooch is a top League One player, bottom half Championship player. I think that's where Jack Diamond can get to, but I think we're probably a little bit too expectant of him at the moment. He's going to take a while to mature. He's naive. He's going to be like that. He's not quite as strong as he needs to be. If you look at where Lyndon Gooch was 4 years ago and look at him now, and look how much we rely on him, not just as a good player and someone with pace and ability to take a man on. We look at him as like someone like who's quite mature and has got a good head on his shoulders and uses his strength as much as his pace. Jack Diamond, I think, will get there, but he's not going to get there this season. I think a bit of an impact sub for me, and I think Saturday sort of proved why he would probably be better coming off the bench for the next couple of games and occasionally starting every 4 or 5. A 5 for me, but he's been a 7 beforehand. That's what you're going to get with him. I think he's going to be a bit inconsistent. Get a bit more experience in him.
Yeah, definitely. Aidan McGeady started on the other wing, and like we say, I think he's played 3 games since he's returned, since Lee Johnson came in, and prior to that, he hadn't played a game in 13, 14 months, I think it was. So, it's going to take him a while to get up to match fitness, and the break from COVID won't have really helped him, but he's capable of more than he showed yesterday, I thought. There was times where he looked a yard off the pace. There was a couple of times where, he's a few step overs, he's overhit the ball. I think there was one time where he was on the left wing, he's trying to get a ball in the box, but just overran it and it went out. But like Charles said earlier, if anyone was going to create anything yesterday, it was probably going to be him. But 5 out of 10 for me again, John.
Yeah, I've gone for a 5. I thought his decision making was wrong. Every time he should have gone down the line, he sort of seemed to cut inside to no avail, and vice versa. You expect a little bit more from him, and I was quite surprised we actually took him off, because I think one bit of magic, he obviously can turn a game. So yeah, 5 for me.
Graham, for you?
6. I really like Aidan McGeady. I've made no secret of that. For me, I was going to say I pay my season ticket price to watch players like him, but I don't. I pay £10 for a stream. But he's someone who I always think can make something happen. He's going to be frustrating. He's a Sessegnon kind of player, if you want a comparison. 5 things won't come off, 5 other things will. Unfortunately, it wasn't a game where a lot came off, but I think Charles commented on it before. If anyone was going to do anything for Sunderland yesterday, it was going to be Aidan McGeady. It gets frustrating when it doesn't come off, but I think you kind of have to live with that with McGeady. He can sometimes be the difference between you winning a game and not winning the game. I thought he was all right. A couple of poor decisions. I think you could see that he's obviously had a 2-week COVID break and a year break before that. You can kind of see it in him a little bit, and that's probably going to need to be managed. I think once Aidan McGeady's up to speed and up and running, you're going to have a really good player there, and I think there's nothing that's worried me hugely since he's come back in the side to make me think, has that year out meant that he's finished at this level? Far from it. In fact, the total opposite. I don't think he looks like he's been away. He just probably needs a bit more match fitness to be the McGeady that we saw 18 months ago.
Yeah. And the last in the starting 11, of course, was Charlie Wyke, who started up front with Danny Graham on the bench, so he was always going to start. But he scored goals all season. Yesterday, he just didn't really have anything to work with. The service was pretty much non-existent for the majority of the game. As John touched on a little bit earlier, his hold-up play wasn't great. He had a half chance, possibly a decent chance in the second half, but he was falling backwards. Could he have scored on another day? Possibly. We'll never know. But based on yesterday's performance, I've given him a 4 out of 10, John.
I've gone with a 5. Obviously, the service wasn't that great, but maybe the one or two other opportunities he has, he probably maybe should take one. So it's a culmination of obviously him and the team, and obviously leaving him very isolated. So yeah, 5 for me.
Graham, for you?
Very similar. 5. I think, to be honest with you, I think all the good attributes of Charlie Wyke's game were nullified by just to double check with Charles. Charles, who was the centre half we used yesterday? The big 6'5", 6'6" guy.
Playing in the middle of the 3, Kean Bolger.
That was the guy. It was Bolger. That's correct, 100%. I felt like he just had he was just better than him. I don't know what the player's like. I can't say I've heard much of him or watched much of him, but it just felt like when Charlie Wyke uses his strength, that's one of his attributes, and when he's on his form, that's when he's bringing all those attributes to the fore. And I felt like Bolger just basically went, I'm bigger than you, I'm taller than you, I'm stronger than you, you're not getting it. And sometimes with Charlie Wyke, he can feel a bit weak-willed for such a big guy. I think this season I can't aim that criticism at him too much, but yesterday it was a bit more Charlie Wyke of last season than the season before. So a 5 for me, because he should be looking to at least compete with defenders. And I think he got a little bit bullied and a bit outmatched yesterday by Bolger. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was 0-0, but a man of the match. John, you're first.
I've actually gone for Sanderson, and that tells you what we need to know. It wasn't a great game. Probably best of a COVID hit bunch, shall we say? He probably, because he's the youngest and he's trying to impress, he's the most enthusiastic, isn't he? So I'll give it to him.
Graham, for you, if you had to pick a forced man of the match.
Difficult to argue. I think Ian Sanderson was probably the one that stuck out in a performance that was drab. It wasn't bad, it was just what it was. Between Sanderson and McGeady, the defence kept a clean sheet. He was part of it, so I'll say Dion Sanderson. I think out of all those ratings, I think he was maybe a 6.5 when no one else got above a 5 or a 6. So yeah, Dion Sanderson for me.
Yeah. And Charles, for you, I know you said obviously Aidan McGeady would look like the only player that ever looked like doing anything with the ball for Sunderland. Was he the only player that really stood out to you as someone that that caught the eye?
I think I agree with the other guys. Sanderson looked, well, he certainly caught my eye. I think it was more because the way that he seemed to run was as if he was doing the 100-meter sprint with the ball. It just stood out as a bit of a funny moment. I'm not picking on him at all. It was just something I noticed and had a little chuckle to myself about. But yeah, he was pretty solid for you. So I'd probably agree. Like I said before, McGeady was the only one that really looked technically better than anybody else on the pitch. But as you lot have said, he didn't really do anything. So you can't really give him man of the match.
Yeah. Well, our next game, as it stands, is against Port Vale in the stuffed crust or the pizza or the Papa John's trophy, however you want to call it. Obviously, week on Tuesday. Graham, score predictions for that one?
Oh, jeez. Where are Port Vale in the league at the minute?
Port Vale, as it stands. Hopefully they played on Saturday. Did they play on Saturday?
Fairly far down.
They did.
Or at least mid-table.
17th in League 2. They're above Mansfield.
Oh, well, that's a worry. Mansfield beat us a few weeks ago. We should win that. It depends what side he puts out, really. But it gets to that kind of exciting point if we beat Port Vale, because you suddenly go, hang on, I think we're in the quarters if we win that. and all of a sudden the pizza trophy is back on again, or the checker trade as we knew it. We should win it. I think Lee Johnson will put out a relatively strong side because I think he understands the importance of winning games, i.e. we did against Oldham and then went into Lincoln. We've got a Saturday off, so there's no reason to rest anyone. We've got AFC Wimbledon, I think, on the Saturday away from home, so not necessarily a hugely strong opponent like Portsmouth or whatever. So yeah, 2-1 I think we'll win, because I think you might change the defence around a little bit, give Bailey Wright and maybe Tom Flanagan a rest, maybe give Jordan Willis 90 minutes, and you never know what players going to be like when they've been away for so long. He could have a bit of a rusty game, so we'll probably concede 2-1, I think. But I'd be happy with any sort of win, to be honest. It would be just nice to get to the latter stages of a competition, because we're undoubtedly going to get a Wembley this season when no fans are allowed and win. We all know that's going to happen.
The most Sunderland thing ever.
It's so Sunderland, it's unbelievable. So I think we'll win. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be very similar to Oldham. It'll be one of those streams where you're trying to stay awake but falling asleep, but we'll make it 1 or 2-0 or 1-0, 2-1, something like that.
John, for you?
I'll probably 3-1 win. I think he's got to use it if he's having training for 10 days. He's got to put out, pretty much the strongest team to get, his message across. So I think strongest team. Is it at home?
It is away, yeah.
Oh,
no,
away.
It's at home. It's at home.
Is home. Oh, at home. Oh, 7-1 then.
Not even a clean sheet.
Nah, we love to concede a goal.
Are you going to stick a 5 on that one then, John?
Yeah, I'll do that just because I've said it now.
I'll wait. I'll retweet it when you put it on Twitter.
Yeah, I will do.
And Charles, I believe your next game is against MK Dons. Obviously, a team that we struggled against, I think. For 14 months, I think, MK Dons had went without an away win before they came to us, Graham. Was that right? Something like that, wasn't it?
Something along that line, yeah. I mean, it's a very Sunderland thing, isn't it? If you're in a bad run, come to Sunderland, you tend to get out of it.
Absolutely.
People old enough to remember will remember that Adi Akinbaye didn't score for about 17 games and scored for Leicester to win 1-0. Those of you old enough to remember that will recall that, and it's pretty much been similar since then. So I think it's something like that. Yes.
Charles, your predictions for that game for Northampton versus MK Dons?
Oh, it's in the pizza trophy, isn't it? I don't care. We're at home. I will go with a 2-1 win.
2-1 win. Very interesting. Optimistic. Not quite as optimistic as John is, but still optimistic nonetheless. That is all we have time for tonight. John, Charles, and Graham, I appreciate you joining me.
You're most welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers for having me. Thanks, guys.
We will be back again whenever our next league game is. Obviously, it could be rescheduled for Saturday. It might not be. I'm not sure. As it stands, I'm not sure who our next league fixture is actually against. I think it might be against AFC Wimbledon. Yeah, I think it's Wimbledon away. So as it stands, we will be back to talk about Wimbledon on the 17th. But until then, we will see you later.